6:37 at the Big 550 KTRS. Paul Harris filling in for McGraw this morning. Last week, the Senate Intelligence Committee released the report on torture that the CIA had been doing for most of the years of the Bush administration. And yesterday, Vice President Cheney was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd and asked questions about that and essentially unapologetically pressed his defense of the CIA's use of harsh interrogation techniques. He insisted that waterboarding and things like that don't amount to torture. When he was asked to define torture, he essentially said, what the terrorists did to us on 9/11, that was torture. What we did was not torture. Meanwhile, John McCain was on Face the Nation saying, I kind of know what torture is because I've been there firsthand, and this was definitely torture and was not what America is supposed to be about. Here to analyze all of this and talk a little bit more about it is Steve Roberts, our ABC News political analyst. Good morning, Steve.
Hi, good morning.
So when Dick Cheney goes on TV and defends this, what's the rationale?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think he is reflecting what he and President Bush and many members of the administration, many people in the country felt after 9/11, that this was one of the most traumatic moments in the entire history of this country, that 3,000 Americans had been killed and the country wanted revenge, and the country wanted to make sure that it wouldn't happen again, and that, as he said yesterday, any means justified that end. And there are a lot of Americans who agree with him on that. And as Cheney said, there hasn't been a subsequent attack on the scale of 9/11 or anything close to that. And so his view is it worked. But there is a counter argument that was contained in that Senate report, and that even many conservatives share some of the concerns that John McCain raised, that America is known not just for its power and economic power, military power, it's also known for its values. Conservatives like to say this is an exceptional nation. It's different from any other country in the world, a city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan used to talk about it. And that means that we live by a certain code of values. And there's a strong feeling that while understandable in a way, the reaction after 9/11, it did cross a line and it did tarnish our values. And so that's the tension that many Americans feel. They can see the argument on both sides. Defending the country, an enormous priority. Defending our values, also an enormous priority. And in a sense, they came into conflict.
In fact, John McCain said on the Senate floor last week, quote, "The question isn't about our enemies, it's about us. It's about who we are, who we were, and who we aspire to be. It's about how we represent ourselves to the world." And yesterday on Face the Nation, he accused Cheney and others of rewriting history. He said, you can't claim that tying someone to the floor and having them freeze to death is not torture. And it's hypocritical to claim that waterboarding isn't torture because the U.S. tried and hanged Japanese soldiers for waterboarding American prisoners during World War II.
Exactly. And as I say, that's the tension. As they say, democracy is not a suicide pact. Democracies have a right and an obligation to defend themselves. And in wartime, you do bend rules. And that was true during World War II. It's been true in virtually every war. At times, civil liberties have been suspended. It happened during the Civil War. But at the same time, the question is, how far do you go? Where is the line? Is there a place where even the defense of the country does not justify certain tactics? In Cheney's view, virtually anything was justified in the cause of defending the country and preventing another terrorist attack. He said it very clearly. Virtually anything would be justified. But McCain and others say, no, as important as it is to defend the country, it's also important to defend our values.
There are people calling for the prosecution of those who not only undertook this efforts, but even all the way up the chain through Cheney to Bush, to prosecute them for potential war crimes here. That's never going to happen, is it?
No, and I don't think that has much support in this country. I think most people understand that the folks in charge of this program had a very, very, very difficult assignment. You got to remember back in the days and months and after 9/11, we had no idea really what had caused this attack, no idea whether another one was being planned and what was imminent. I talked to Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld in those those days, and I remember him saying with enormous feeling, you know, this country could absorb an attack that killed 3,000 Americans, but 30,000, 300,000. This was the nightmare that kept these officials awake, and which in their mind justified virtually any tactic. And so I think people, even in hindsight, if they say, look, they went too far, but they did it for good motives. They did it because they felt that their mission was to defend the country. And so I don't think there's any support, or significant support, for any kind of prosecution. But I do think that there is significant understanding that the points made in the Senate committee report have some validity too.
And there's the administration, the Bush administration rather, they would simply claim, look, we had the Justice Department giving us essentially legal justification for this, right?
That's right. And I think that they could make that claim if it ever came down to a legal fight. But I don't think it ever will come to that. I really don't think that there's any serious, even among Democrats, any serious support for the idea of prosecution. Even if these folks went beyond a moral line, they did it as patriots. They did it as people who felt that they were assigned a mission to defend the country, and that was a very profound mission. And I think you can understand this ambivalence. At the core of this problem is this tension between the mission they were given and the tactics that they used.
ABC News political analyst Steve Roberts, thanks for your time today.
Okay, sure.
You know, one of the interesting things to me about this is the claim that, well, you can't say it wasn't effective. After all, we didn't have another attack on America after 9/11. Well, when President Obama came into office in January of 2009, he stopped this torture, and we haven't had an attack since then either. So can you similarly make the claim, look, not torturing has protected the country, especially if the Senate report is correct that the torture that we were doing wasn't effective in gathering information anyway, and the information that we did gather from some of these people who we were holding, we got without the torture.
And wasn't it like 25% of the people that were tortured weren't even...
26 of the 119 were innocent.
Yeah, they were innocent.
And Cheney's attitude yesterday on Meet the Press was, I don't care if they're innocent. Doesn't matter. Which raises a whole question about how he views the American legal system. 6:45 at the Big 5.